So Jordan Peterson's back, guys, and like back like a lot. If you haven't paid attention, his YouTube channel is like putting out content like every day, a lot of content. Podcast is back up. Has a new book, all this stuff. Jordan Peterson's back, guys. And for those that have known me for any period of time, you guys know that I've always been a fan, air quotes, of Dave Rubin and Jordan Peterson because they are some of the most hilarious individuals in the IDW, of course, and just overall the right-wing media ecosystem. They are perhaps like the most entertaining people in that sphere just because of the wild and stupid shit they say. Now, we're not going to play this whole thing because it's 2 hours. I'm not doing that. And I watched it all. So I've seen the whole thing. And a lot of it is bullshit. And before I play the clips that I've selected, I forgot how much Jordan Peterson is just like this metaphysical rambling. Like this sort of deluge of talking points that lack complete substance, and combined with like this like obvious hatred for like feminism and Marxism. Combine that with nowadays a like deep depression and like self-loathing, which is very weird to watch. Like it was like this guy was depressed throughout this whole video, and he like cried numerous times. It was odd. Yeah, and then you have Dave Rubin, who's just like look at his face right there, man. Like he's a golden retriever as a human being, right? Like just a dumb person. Jordan Peterson, though, he tries to be smart. But let's play this clip. We're gonna play 2 sections and then move on. I'm not gonna play the whole thing just because, again, it's a lot.
Dave, really? Well, I've been an advocate for people to put their lives together. And of course, my life has fallen apart. And so you might ask yourself, well, are you aware of the irony of that? And the answer to that is, well, absolutely. It's shameful. I feel that frequently. And then so you might say, and people tweet this out fairly regularly, who am I to give advice? And I suppose that's a perfectly relevant question. I guess I've always thought, and I said this too in the lectures during the tour, that I don't really think that what I'm doing is giving advice, or if I am, I'm also giving it to me. It's not like I believe that I have all the answers. I have answers that I've found useful while attempting to move ahead. And with this new book, I can show you this. That's what it looks like. The black counterpart to the white book, the previous book.
Out today.
I wrote a lot of it while I was extremely ill. And there were some advantages to that, I think, in that I only kept...
With this like unknown, unnamed disease that had him thinking like days were weeks and sound was too painful. What? I'm sorry.
That material that I felt was reliable under duress. Now, I think perhaps my creativity was somewhat compromised, and so that may have impacted the book negatively, but it made for more severe editing. For example, the last chapter is be grateful in spite of your suffering. And certainly maintaining that gratitude is something I've struggled with. I think anybody who's in pain chronically struggles with resentment, but I know that resentment poisons. And I think that form of courage. And so I stand by what I've written.
It's funny. I would hear some version of that. People would ask me when they would ask about you, and they would say, "Oh, well, he was telling people to get their lives together, and here, look what happened to him." And my answer was always the same with people, which is, well, first off, he never professed to be Jesus. He never professed to be perfect. You actually, and this is one of the things that I think really helped me throughout the tour. you would often address if you were struggling with something. You know, you, from what I saw, virtually every night gave a different lecture every night. And if you were frustrated by something on a given day,
it's so good. It's so good. You're not Jesus, man. Like, you never said you were Jesus. So like, your entire like self-help guru bullshit brand that you've created and how it's all bullshit. Yeah, that's fine, because you never said you were Jesus Christ. Come on, man. You never said you're the Son of God. So good, man. It's just fantastic content right there. Let's get to the other section. Let me try to remember exactly where it's at. I believe it was at the 1 hour 16-minute and 30-second mark. I believe it's where it's at. Go a little bit before it though, just in case.
Car accident, you're going to be in pain regardless of your state of moral readiness, let's say.
Right. Chapter 6, abandon ideology. I think we could all use a little bit of this right now.
Well, that chapter is really an injunction.
By the way, this is the only part where he really talks about Marxism. And that's what I was actually disappointed. This whole interview is really boring, to be quite honest. This is the only parts that were kind of entertaining to me. Other than like him crying, because he cries later on in the interview, like a lot. That was entertaining. I will admit that. But for a guy that got a lot of his shtick on hating trans people, hating feminism, hating Marxism, that really didn't come up that much. It was a lot of self-help bullshit about how to deal with order and chaos, and it's bullshit. It's not material. It's not substantive. It's self-help bullshit you've heard 1,000 times. Like, let's just be honest about it. Like, there's no difference between what he is saying in large aspects from like the Tony Robbins of the world, right? Except for the moments he does talk about Marxism and feminism and trans people, because then at least he's wildly like crazy and like takes on like this evil like Kermit the Frog character when he's talking about it. Otherwise, again, it's just self-help stuff that is not interesting in the slightest to me.
To allow yourself to think in more complex terms, it's useful to reduce a complex phenomena to its simpler elements, but it's not useful to reduce it to the point of absurdity. And so you can explain hierarchical function using power. You can explain human dynamics using sex. Freud did that. Marx did it with economics, let's say. You can boil down human motivation to a single dimension, and then you can make a compelling story about why that's everything. But it isn't everything. Most things are multivariate, and a good example of that is the wage gap. By the way,
Marx definitely talked about it being a multi-layered issue when it comes to state control, when it comes to economic control, and when you compare different modes of production, you know, like the feudalist mode of production compared to the capitalist mode of production. But digressing, like it, I love how like his whole shtick right now is, oh, when you break things down to its simplest form, it's then absurd, is basically what he's saying. And then he tried to do that with Marx. Again, the irony of it all, just fantastic.
Gap between men and women. Mm-hmm. There's lots of reasons for that. Many, not one. And it's much more.
Look how angry he is, right? Like, it's not just one. It's not just sexism. It's not just the patriarchy. No. It's not. Patriarchy is good, actually, by the way.
Satisfying in some sense if it's one. Yeah. Partly because then you can identify the enemy and you cannot be the enemy, and then you can be good. And so oversimplification is satisfying. You often don't have to test out your theories in the real world to see if they work, and it can give you an unearned sense of moral superiority. And so that's what that chapter is about. It's like
scientific tests are usually about like restricting as many variables as possible, right? Even though like you're talking about social sciences instead, right? Like you're kind of interchanging that. But you kind of do the same thing with social science. If you're conducting experiments, you want to restrict as many variables as possible and isolate exactly what you're testing. So again, just Jordan Peterson's an idiot. Like I said, that's all we're gonna watch because it's actually not that entertaining. I was actually really shocked by it. I ate a ton of edibles and I watched it, and it kind of like ruined my high because it wasn't as entertaining as I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be more batshit. They never talked about Trump really. They never talk about Joe Biden. They don't talk about the election. They don't talk about anything that has some sort of material like reality. It's all metaphysical self-help bullshit for 99% of this interview. And that stuff has never been entertaining or intriguing to me when it comes to critiquing or reacting to, unfortunately.